Peace, all peace. So obviously, the Queen of the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth II, recently passed away on September 8th, 2022, at the age of 96. For a woman who rarely spoke, made any public appearances, or as far as we know, contributed to much of anything in the community or to society at large, I think there was much hysteria around the set of circumstances regarding her passing for no reason, other than for simply being a figurehead or a symbol to uphold concepts of old, like royalty and house of this, house of that, and things like titles and honors. It's clear that she was obviously of age, most likely unwell, and these things happen, and when they do, you have to make sure that we don't get too high, we don't get too low, and we have to keep a cool head. That being said, as you have probably seen by now, many on the internet were outright celebrating her passing and cracking jokes over the situation. And for what reason? None of us knew her personally, and she may have been an extremely pleasant woman for all we know. It was unfair and unjust to ridicule her death essentially for the sins of her ancestors. Like mentioned, she was simply a figurehead and a symbol for more sinister ideals behind closed doors. She most likely never stepped foot on a battleground, planned or even thought of or initiated any of the United Kingdom's colonial or imperial missions over the past 50, 60, or 70 years. Sure, she was the one in charge, she was the one with the last say-so, might have put pen to paper and ultimately gave the green light or the go-ahead, but let's be honest, I doubt she planned, thought of, came up with, or carried out much of anything that the United Kingdom was responsible for in the past decades. She's more of a prisoner of the moment and a victim of her success, for lack of a better word, more so than an orchestrator or a shot caller. Like many that are lucky enough to reach that age, she was a wife, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a sister, etc., and the jokes on the internet were rather uncalled for. I do not feel sorry for her. I do not condone what she may have approved of, but nonetheless, you wouldn't want to be ridiculed and humiliated in your passing for things that your ancestors did. I find it funny how Princess Diana is venerated and is looked at as some sort of angelic saint who could do no wrong, even though she actively she decided to marry into such a family that is so horrible and so cynical. In the 80s, when the royal family and the United Kingdom were at the peak of their powers, at least she had a choice. Queen Elizabeth had no choice. It was her birthright, and for all we know, to her, it may have been more of a burden than a blessing. Also, I see a lot of the word colonialism being thrown around, and while a lot of that is true, especially for that time period, in this day and age, I think it's important to discuss how that has developed into imperialism that the United Kingdom has forced onto its subjects. The notion of colonialism essentially refers to the actual movement of people to said new territory, becoming permanent settlers and taking over, whereas imperialism refers to more exerting control over said conquered regions through direct or indirect means, control, governance, etc. And you also have to look at the etymology of both words, whereas colony comes from the Latin colonis, which means to farm. So again, being there in person, starting families, taking over the region, and cultivating and farming said land. And imperialism comes from the Latin word imperium, which means to command. So again, setting up corrupt, illegitimate governments that prioritize the monarchy and diplomacy over the well-being of their own people. Now, I know there are some people that will watch this video and will think, how can he absolve the Queen and absolve the royal family of responsibility for what the United Kingdom has done to foreign nations in the past as far as imperialism and colonialism? And that's not at all what I'm doing. I simply wanted to point out, specifically in response to the diaspora and the descendants, whether first or 10th generation of the so-called subjects and colonies of the United Kingdom, not only cracking jokes, but getting emotional, asking for things like apologies, and pointing the finger and placing the blame solely on the Queen and her family. When things of that magnitude and severity are being planned out and carried out, like imperialism, it takes a lot more than an old woman and a monarch for that to happen. There are a lot of moving parts, a lot of things at play behind the scenes in order for that to materialize. Sure, the United Kingdom, alongside France, Portugal, Germany, Belgium, Spain, and Italy, to name a few, are cynical for what they have done to extend their power and reach around the globe. But where is the accountability? I mean, for starters, apologies do nothing and are often insincere and disingenuous, so I don't know why people would ask for that. Secondly, look at the size and the number of people and the natural resources and raw materials available to some of the so-called colonies and countries that were taken over. I mean, how do you let that happen? It may be considered a hot take or an unpopular opinion, but why don't we start addressing things from that angle? Instead of always trying to point the finger or place the blame on others, I think we should look to some of the heads and some of the leaders of the countries that were colonized by little old Europe and ask ourselves, how could you let that happen? You guys have more people, you outnumber them, you guys have bigger countries, and you could say you have better land, which is why you have more natural resources and more raw materials available, especially with the weather conditions. So when you take all things into account, it really doesn't make any sense how you were colonized. Is there no fault or blame or responsibility to be taken by those leaders for that? I mean, even you as an individual, if somebody tries to come to your house and tell you what to do in your house, what would you say? Or if they come to your house and try to steal, would you just let them? Blame is to be passed around to everybody when it comes to imperialism and colonialism, and the victims and the perpetrators are both at fault for obviously different reasons. So remember, guys, to always take accountability, think for yourself, and be sure to not buy into the pity party that the mainstream media tries to give you. Like the video, comment, subscribe. Stay safe. See you soon. Bless.